Let me know when you're ready. Aloha. Hi, Sue. How are you? Okay, so before we start, always a few announcements. It's been chilly lately, hasn't it?
Yes, darling.
Baby, it's cold outside. Okay.
What do you mean?
I know, I never get cold on my feet. I mean, my legs, but the rest of me, yes. Okay, so tomorrow night starts the wonderful, wonderful class. And the bookstore is open because our divine Miss Roseanne, who's over there eating cookies right now, she will be at the bookstore for any of your needs. But this is the only book that is needed for that class. Starts tomorrow from 6 to 8:30. And it is successful living that we all already do, but we just want more of that. And then the annual meeting is February 17th, right after service. Well, we say right after, but you know what I mean. It's sometime in that day, and that's on the 17th. And then we have, and this is the Valentine renewal thing. Somebody asked, well, what if you're single? Well, what about that is then you're single. But that's about is we still need, what do we need, Michelle? We need people to
come and support us.
That's right, because I'm going to let you in on a secret. Michelle, her first wedding was in a beautiful place, but nobody was there. So this is an opportunity for Michelle to have a whole wedding thing. Yeah, so Michelle and there we go. See how it is, and then that's on February 14th. And anything else, Rita? Oh yes, Thursday, Healing Circle right here. And it's Reverend Diane this Thursday. So, oh no, it's not. That's the meditation. Why in the heck am I giving the announcements? No, I know, right?
Really confused everybody. There's a healing circle Thursday night.
Wow.
And Maria will be playing, and I will be leading it. And it will be a wonderful evening of healing.
We've all been to the.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Okay. Yes.
Thursday, 6:30 to 7:30.
It's the circle where you all we nurture.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I don't know how many practitioners are going to be there, but that doesn't.
so that's it. So go ahead.
So before we introduce Michelle, she asked me to do the opening treatment, so I will do it. So let's just take a beautiful deep breath together and anchor ourselves right here and right now. And I give great gratitude in advance for this wonderful evening, knowing that that power and presence and that light and that love and that energy that created everything is right here where we are, right here in this moment, always, living and breathing through each of us, and magnificent in all its ways in through each of us. So I know this evening is filled with that spirit, that light, that energy, and I speak my word from that place, knowing the perfect unfoldment of this evening, and that this beautiful, beautiful being, Michelle Lemay, she just has all the right stuff, showing up at the right time to give us this beautiful message from Wayne Dyer and all his teachings and his books and everything that he's done to bring light into this world. So I know we have all come here for our own purpose, and I know that that purpose is fulfilled tonight for each of us individually and for his group collectively, that tonight is just a perfect flow of beautiful intelligence moving through the evening, through and as Michelle and through each and every one of us. So I am so grateful for tonight in advance, as I said, and just grateful for its perfect unfoldment, and I just let it be that, and I just get out of the way, and I just accept it as done, as we affirm together, and so it is. Michelle Lemay.
Aloha. I'm very excited that you all chose to join me, and I know there's some folks watching online. We're live streaming, so later on we'll have a little activity that we'll do. So everything will be on the microphone for those who are watching, and then those who will be watching later. And my mom is very excited. Hi, Mom. I feel like at the Academy Awards. So what I want this evening to be and unfold is really celebrating Wayne Dyer and his works, but I also want to weave in some personal stories that I've had, and then at the end, if there's time, leave room and opportunities for you to share possibly an influence that has happened in your life from Wayne, or anything that was brought up from what I share. Wayne Dyer started publishing books before I was born. However, he has had 4 decades of being a metaphysician and sharing his love and his life. And he was someone that grew and unfolded very publicly and changed lives of millions of people. He is internationally known. He has 21 out of his 40 books be bestsellers. He is an author, a speaker, an inspirational person. I mean, he's really just embodied his work. And a lot of his work came because of his own life experiences. And that's partly why I want to share some of my experiences with Wayne. I never met him directly or personally, but his books touched my life and helped me change my life. And then just a year before he passed, I wasn't at an event that he was at that helped me do a dramatic shift in my life. So is everyone familiar with Wayne? Okay, on some level. Because amazingly, Rita and I were talking about when he passed away, there was a lot of people who had never heard of him and didn't know who he was. So in the millions and millions and millions of people he touched, there's still millions and millions more yet to be touched. And one of the things that I found is that his legacy is still moving forward. And if you go on his Facebook page, onto his website, everything is still current, and he still has a team that is putting everything out as if he was still here, because truly he is still here. And I'm also going to share, along with his life and his works, how this ties in with our philosophy here at CSL, because it absolutely does. So first, I'd like to start with his early life and childhood. He really had a traumatic childhood, yet he didn't see it that way. He really believed that he had to go through everything he went through for him to teach what he has been teaching and what he taught. And he always had a perspective that everything was perfect. Even though he didn't really consciously know this when he was a child, he knew when he looks back at his childhood that he was always taken care of, everything was always perfect, and it all had to happen the way it happened. And he was one of 3 sons that was born to a mom that was very young. He was born in 1940 in Detroit, and that's also where he grew up. And his dad was very violent. He was very abusive to his mom and the kids as well, and was in and out of jail, and eventually just abandoned the family. So he never, literally never saw his dad again. However, his dad would come to play in his story that I'll share in a little bit, just in regards to, his work and what happened. So he really spent a lot of his time in and out of orphanages with one of his brothers. The older brother went to live with the grandmother, and then it was almost a package deal. Like he and his brother went to the same orphanages and the same foster homes until he was 10. And then that's when he was reunited with his other brother and his mom, because his mom was a struggling single mom and trying to make it just after the Depression, during World War II. Like, it was just what it had to be at the time. And there's a lot of talks where he shares about how he took his experience and grew from this, and how his brother had the same experiences and totally went down into alcoholism and really, he ended up shifting his life later on, but it took several decades, whereas Wayne really embraced and took everything right away and moved forward and created this amazing life. So his introduction into what we now call New Thought was when he went to the Navy. He was given the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And he said he just read it over and over and over. And what it did is it actually helped him through the 4 years that he was in the Navy. Because as you can imagine, it's pretty horrific. And he was able to put the principles that he learned in those books into his life right away. And really what that meant was he changed his perspective about his experience. And he really learned how to grow through what he was going into. And his brother, again, went into the Army and had his own experiences and took that into the other direction. And I use that because he also really, really believes that we're always at choice on how we choose to look at things. And that's just a really great example of in families how I know it happens in my family, like had the same experiences and completely different memories about the same thing, and also different reactions, and took away different pieces from whatever the experiences were. So he sees his life, and that's something that we talk about here too, right? Like that we had to do and go through everything, and that there's always this divinely guided energy that's always moving our life forward, even when we don't think so. Even when it doesn't feel like it, it really is on the perfect track. And he has taken so much of what he learned as a childhood and then young adult and even into his adulthood, because he definitely had some dysfunction as well to work through. And it's definitely not something that he was very secretive about. It was pretty open. He's shared about it. He has spoken about it. He's written about it. And that's also how he got to grow spiritually and emotionally very, very publicly, and did it in such a way to help others. And I believe that's one of the greatest things about Wayne, is that he was always willing to keep growing, always willing to learn new things, very open to try new experiences, different meditations, different philosophies. And you see that in the progression of his books, which he had 40 of them, so he had plenty of things to write about. But he felt like he was born to write. He had to write, as if like we need air to breathe. He had to write, and he started writing when he was a child and actually wrote his first book when he was 15 years old. So he knew that this was in him, and it took quite a bit, and quite a while, a couple decades, before he finally got published in the sense that we know of him now. He definitely, through school and college, and he was a professor and was a guidance counselor at school, he would write papers for journals, he said, that nobody read. So he was published, but nobody cared. And nobody was interested in what he had wanted to say. But when he was in the Navy, he also wrote 4 books then and wrote lots of essays. So it was just who he was. He is a writer. So I was sharing about how his early career, he was a school teacher, guidance counselor, he was a professor at St. John's University in New York, he was a clinical psychologist. I mean, he had a lot of learning and a lot of schooling, but really where the bulk of his information came from was from actually working with people and really seeing the places where people would get stuck, and that it was their beliefs and their thoughts, and that they didn't have the tools. So that's another thing that corresponds with what we do here at CSL, is that he wanted to find practical tools that were simple, that people could do in their lives right away, which is exactly what we learn here and what Rita and Patrick really encourage us to do and invite us to do, is to take these principles into his life, into our lives. And so as he was taking them into his life, he was sharing and doing talks already before he was ever published with his first book. And so what he was saying in one of the interviews I was listening to is that he always had the same message, but all of a sudden his audience got larger. Yeah. Right. So a lot of his work was around that self-discovery and the personal growth. But when he first started writing, like the published books that we know, in the beginning, he wouldn't have called himself spiritual. He wouldn't have even called himself metaphysical. Although he was, he wouldn't have called himself that. And it was there was a shift in his writings in the 90s where he did start just publicly being more and more spiritual. But before any of that happened, in 1974 is where he had his turning point. And that's when he had been searching for his dad, and through a series of coincidences, as we know, aren't really coincidences, they're just guidance and intuition, he found out that his dad had passed away and where his dad was buried. And he has a wonderful, wonderful story that I won't go into, but if it interests you to learn more, there's so much on YouTube and his website. But it's a really touching story, and one that touches my heart too, and I'll share why in a moment. But he had had so much rage and so much anger, and all his abandonment issues and wounds were there, and it was showing up in all aspects of his life. He said he was the unhealthiest he had ever been. He was the heaviest he had ever been. His writing really wasn't going anywhere. There was lots of problems in his marriage and with his children, especially because of the anger and dealing with alcoholism. So there was a lot of angst there. And simultaneously, he had been looking for his dad. So he went and did a trip down to Biloxi where his dad was buried. And he said after 3 hours of stomping on his grave and crying and cursing and getting everything out that he'd ever wanted to say to his dad, he drew a line and said, I will not allow this to affect my life anymore. And he said that's when he forgave his dad. That's when he felt love for his dad. And he said that he knew his dad was there with him. And because of this forgiveness, all those avenues where he was stuck blew wide open. It was just weeks before he went back and wrote Your Erroneous Zones. And he wrote that in 18 days, and it became a #1 bestseller, and it's what brought him mainstream. It's what brought him to who we know as the man Wayne Dyer. And why that was important for me is because I had a huge healing this past year around my dad. And growing up in a dysfunctional home, there was lots of all kinds of stuff. And a few years ago, as I was going through practitioner class, I came to a time where I just knew I could not have my dad in my life. And I knew that I had to create that separation to heal and to work out what I needed to work out. And it was a challenging time. It was a really difficult decision, but I did it out of love instead of anger. And the love was for myself and knowing that I needed different. Through Practitioner 1 and Practitioner 2, there's a lot of self-reflection. There's a lot of looking at our beliefs. And what I found was, through a series of coincidences, it just kept coming up for me that even though I had felt okay about my decision, the unforgiveness that I still had was creating blocks in all areas of my life. Creativity, with my career, finances, my relationship, how I felt about myself, everything. It affected everything. And through Prac 2, and during that time, so I would say just about a year ago, I had lots of people in my life who were losing their parents. And I had this thought, it came out of the blue, felt like it anyways, that, would I be okay if my dad were to die? And the answer was no. And so I had to do a lot of looking at that, a lot of clearing, a lot of cleansing to even come to the point to reach out to my dad and rekindle our relationship. But not only did I rekindle that relationship, but I actually went back to New Hampshire and spent 2 weeks with him, and we both survived. That's a miracle in itself. But because of that healing, and because I really cleared out that unforgiveness, my life has opened up in ways I never would have known, including making the choice to become minister, going back to a career I had left, being able to travel more, having more abundance and prosperity. I saw that healing in all aspects of my life. And I really didn't get that connection until today when I was working on this and just listening to some of his talks. And it's amazing because that unforgiveness was kind of under the surface for me too for a long time. So when it became apparent that something had to change and something had to give, once I saw that and I became aware of it, I had so many tools now that are very similar to what Wayne teaches that we have here. And a lot of it, I would say 98% of it, was changing my perspectives and rewriting my story and reclaiming and feeling all the feelings that I had to feel. And that's really what he started off with right away with Your Erroneous Zones. Because a lot of people actually had a different idea of what that title meant. So he said, that made me laugh, that in the beginning, a lot of people were hiding their books in paper bags because there felt like there was some sexual overtone about it. But it's not at all. Erroneous means wrong or not right. So he talks about the self-doubt, the unforgiveness, all the things that are really running the show that we're not aware of. So that's why it became so popular. And it was his first book. And this is the greatest picture. Where'd it go? So, sorry, I got ahead of myself. I have sprinkled out throughout all these different quotes, too. And this one says, if you really want something, you will find a way. If you don't, you will find an excuse. And that'll tie into later. But this is my most favorite picture of him because he reminds me of Jack Nicholson. Yeah. So people thought he was crazy. And well, but truly, people poo-pooed him. They thought he was crazy. This was before we call it the shelf help now. There were definitely books. There were definitely other people who were talking. There had been people talking about this kind of stuff for the past 100 years. You know, it wasn't necessarily new. He was just delivering it in a different way. He quit his job. That was big. He was a professor at the university. His boss thought he was crazy, but he knew he had to do it. He knew he had to follow whatever it was that was calling him to do this. So he hopped in his station wagon. He created his own book tour. He self-promoted himself and went around the country doing to all the bookstores and all the different places where he could just share and talk about his book and his story. And it was almost like a sneaker where it like snuck up on the New York bestsellers list. A lot of people didn't expect that, and it stayed there for years. So that shows a couple things. In regards to timing, it was the perfect time. People were needing it, wanting it. He fulfilled a need. And also he had the tenacity to go off on his own and to make it happen. This is another one of his books. You'll see it when you believe it. A lot of times we have that a little twisted, right? That we'll believe it when we see it. And that's another correlation that we have with Wayne Dyer and truly why he's a part of the New Thought umbrella, even though he never really associated himself with any philosophy, any church, nothing like that. But it was all about changing our thoughts, changing our outsides via our insides, and it all had to do with belief and faith and trusting, following our hearts, following what brought us joy is really what he taught. Another really famous one, and Rita just said this. I was giggling when Rita said this on Sunday because I knew I already had it up here for the presentation. It says, change the way you see things and the things you see will change. How many of you experienced something like that before? Right, like the outside, whatever it is, or the person, place, or thing probably didn't change. But when I change, all of a sudden that shows up differently. And the part with Wayne and quitting his job, I got to see him at a Hay House event. He was extremely active with Louise Hay. They were pretty much besties. And he did a lot with Hay House. And he did all the different events, the You Can Do It's. That's the one that, or I Can Do It was the one that I had went to in Austin. And I went in 2014, so it was the year before he died. There were probably a dozen or more speakers that came and spoke that weekend, throughout the weekend. And almost every one of them, what I heard was that they all stopped doing what wasn't really working to be able to do what they were meant to be doing. And I kept hearing it time, speaker after speaker, time after time. And when he came up and shared that, there was something that when, like, I kept hearing it, and I've learned to, if something keeps coming up more than 3 or 4 times, pay attention. I've gotten it down to twice, but then it was 3 or 4 times. And I had this huge revelation, and I had this huge shift in my mindset that even though it wasn't horrible, I wasn't where I was really meant to be either. And I had been about 9 years as a tour guide and feeling really irritable, discontent. Funny enough, that's the kind of people that were showing up on my tours. I was gone a lot. I was wanting to, I just needed something different, and I had no idea what it was. And I FaceTimed Ron from that event, and the tears were, I don't even know how he understood what I was saying. But that's when I made the decision to leave that career. With nothing in place, no safety net, not having a clue what I was meant to do, I just knew I had to do it. And because he shared his story, And I heard how like he let go of something that felt safe in order to follow his truth. And time after time, that's what I kept hearing every person say on stage. Then I knew that that would be for me too. So the irony of it is 4 years later, I've gone back to this profession and I'm tour managing once again, and I'm a different person. So guess what's happened with the people who've showed up on my tours? They're different and nicer and more fun. But through the 4 years, that's when, right before then, is when I found CSL and met Reverend Rita and Reverend Patrick. And I finished my last tour, and I got into class, and I just kept taking class after class after class, where eventually, 3.5 years later, I was practitioner, had no idea what that was. And then through that last few months of practitioner, when I decided to become minister. And had I stayed in that job, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And as my classes were ending, that's when I got the call to go back out on the road and to do the tours. So again, it's all about that timing and that flow. And I know it was a direct result of that unforgiveness I had cleared out with my dad. I just know it because I can see it. I can see the thread through. And it was amazing to see how I vacillated between the fear and the excitement and the, oh my God, yay, and oh my God, what did I just do? And all that. But because I delved into the philosophy, science of mind and spirit, and used the tools and put them into my life, things unfolded the way they unfolded, and it wasn't always easy, just like Wayne shares about his life. It's not always easy, and it's very difficult. And Ron and I went through some tough times, and we kept going, and we went through them, and we cleared out a lot of, I'll speak for myself, I cleared out a lot of stuff to really bring that flow. And I know that when I first learned about Wayne Dyer, that also happened for me, because I don't even remember what book, but it was in my early 20s, and it was really life-changing then as well. Now, with his family life, I'll get a little bit personal with him. I was honestly not able to find too much about his children and photos, so I found a few, but I know that he had 3 wives, and when he passed away, he did have a girlfriend. So he had 8 kids, 6 of them were his own, and then 2 were stepkids, but he never referred to them as stepkids. That's just what they were, because they came with one of his wives, but they were his kids. They were his kids. And there were definitely challenging times I shared about just with the alcoholism, rage, finding out where he was. A lot of that cleared out. But of course, he's still human. So he had this loving, amazing grace about him, and he was human. And so there were things that definitely he kept working out. With his daughter, Serena, she's an amazing singer. She sang at that event too. And they did a book together called Don't Die with Your Music Still in You. And it's a great title. And for her, it was specific with the music. But really, whatever the music is for each and every one of us, it's the idea of letting that divine flow through us and express, because that's what it wants to do. It wants to. How many have ever seen any of his PBS specials? Yeah, I remember when I was younger seeing them too. I had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't know who he was. I just knew that there was something about him that just felt good. It just made sense what he was talking about. And I know that my mom, I was sharing, my mom was excited. My mom, had heard about him through all his books, and I definitely wonder about the PBS part, because what he did was bring it mainstream. He brought new thought to literally everybody's living room. So even people who had not heard of him or hadn't seen any of his books or read any of his books, they were introduced to Wayne in such a way that, it was public access TV, and he raised $250 million through just that venue alone. That's a lot. And that's been over the years, but one of the things that he would do is he would take his books and use his books as the episodes. So, of course, it was definitely self-promoting, but it was a way to get it out there. Just like, I don't know if you remember when The Secret first came out, that was another pop of getting it out into the mainstream and making it not look woo-woo and not look odd or weird or mysterious. It took the mysterious out and really showed and proved that it's practical and that you can take these tools and bring it into your life. And then he started going on all different shows. So Merv Griffin, The Tonight Show, Phil Donahue. He was with Oprah. I've found so many different interviews with Oprah that he's been on with her, both when she had her TV show, but then Super Soul Sunday, and then her radio show and her podcast. So he really had, and they all became friends. That's what's really neat when you really look at his life. And I have some photos that I'll share soon. Like, they were all his family. They were all his buddies. They were all people that he connected with. So yes, it was all about getting his message out, and it was all about creating connections in the meantime. And he did a lot to support and promote other people too. And that's what's really been great. I was sharing about Hay House. So his last years, he's extremely active with Hay House, which is Louise Hay's publishing company that she started on her own. And he would go to all the events, but he was also instrumental in finding a lot of their authors. And Anita Morjani was one of the ones that her story came across his desk. She had already written her book and was just trying to get it out there. If you're not familiar with Anita, she was riddled with cancer and died. She did die, and everything was completely documented. And she, on the other side, had her moment of forgiveness and saw that she had a choice to come back, and she chose to come back. And within several weeks, all her tumors were gone, and she was completely cancer-free. And people doubted it. People didn't think it was real. Even the people that watched her die didn't believe her experience. And Wayne was fascinated. He loved anybody's story like this. And when it came across his desk, he sought out Anita himself to get her published with Hay House. And she was also one of the speakers that I got to see at that I Can Do It event. And then Immaculée, Rita had reminded me, she is the Rwandan refugee that survived the genocide. She also spoke at that event, and it was Wayne who was very instrumental in helping her bring her story out into the world. You do not attract what you want, you attract what you are. That's exactly what we do here in the philosophy. Because if we keep talking about what we want, it comes from a place of lack. Like we're wanting, we don't have, we need it. It's almost like that grabby. I even feel myself doing it. But if you already are it, then you just end up bringing it and attracting it into your life with ease and grace. So if it's love, for example, with the Valentines, if it's love or a partner or just more community, the best way is to be that love, support that love, celebrate that love when you see it. If it's prosperity, be excited for people when they are succeeding or whatever it is, however it shows up, or creative expression. Like there's nothing, for me, I have a friend that's very creative and very artistic, and I love seeing her work and supporting her and just uplifting her, because as we lift each other up, we all rise. And we start to feel it, and it's that visceral feeling that brings into our life what we are wanting to experience. So he also had different calendars. This is the Power of Intention. It was a daily where he'd have daily quotes. And then the Getting Into the Gap was a small book, but it came with a CD. He very much got into different meditations. So that's also what's on his podcast. I mean, it's almost endless what you can find out there if you're wanting to just really start getting into his different practices and what he wanted to share and what he brought out into the world. And then, again, with the coincidences, on 9/11, 2001, on that date, that fateful date that we probably all know and remember where we were when the Twin Towers got hit and fell down, this book came out. That day and that date for publishing had been planned who knows how long before. So that's, for me, I know when there's something guiding, something divine that's happening. Because the book there's a spiritual solution to every problem. And when he uses every, he means every. Because in the universe and in the mind of God, there is no small, there is no large, there is no horrific, there is no not so good. There just isn't. So even something with that catastrophic, because it did, it rocked the world, he believed that there is a solution to that too. And it's really all about what we teach here, and that peace has to come from with us, and that we are the world, and that there is only one in this room, and in the room that we call the universe. And I just love when I heard him share, I heard this story many years ago, because people wanted him to take it off the presses because of what was currently happening. And he's like, this is why it needs to go to press. This is exactly what needs to happen and why we need this kind of healing. And it did shake up a lot of people's lives. It definitely, I know for me, 9/11, I was in this interesting place in my life where I was just about to get married. I owned a house in New Hampshire. I had a great job. I had a business. I had all the things going for me. And all of a sudden, it was that checkpoint, like, oh, is this really it? And even though it took a couple years, it is ultimately the start of what led me and my ex-husband to move out to Hawaii, because I wasn't where I wanted to be. And I was grateful to have the house and the good job and all that, totally grateful for it. And I knew there was something different. And I believe that this is true for everything. I might not always feel it in the moment. Not gonna lie. Sometimes it's hard to remember this. But when I do, everything shifts. And then I forget, and then I remember. And then I forget, and then I remember. And then he created a movie as well called The Shift, which is a documentary-esque type of movie, but it's a great movie to, he keeps it simple in the movie, actually. So it's another way to really bring this out into the mainstream, and you can stream it. I'm pretty sure you can find it on YouTube, but you can stream it and, see it. Go the extra mile. It's never crowded. He also has another saying, it's never crowded at the top. And what he means with extra mile is whatever it is that we feel our best is, then just do one little bit more. Just keep moving forward and keep moving in the direction of what you're wanting. Because what will happen is eventually it doesn't get crowded. And eventually everybody is going to know that they are moving in this direction and that there are changes that are happening and growing. But in the meantime, we can go there together. A couple of his other books, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. Hello. What we teach here, what we do here, what we practice here. And then Manifesting 101, which is, again, all different. That one is a fairly newer one, so I haven't had the opportunity to look at it myself. But what I got from it is that, again, it's all practical things in a very simplistic way. And it's not necessarily that it's easy to do everything, but it's simple. Wishes fulfilled and inspiration, your ultimate calling. So what would happen for Wayne when he got called? He called it his calling. When he got called to write a book, it was almost an obsession. He had his own apartment that is his writing apartment, and he would write, but he would write like he hand wrote it all. And that is a lot of dedication. He called 3 a.m. his magic hour, and he felt that it was spirit waking him to write. He felt that he was just a channel. He didn't feel he was finding anything new. He wasn't creating anything. He was just delivering all the messages. Friends are God's way of apologizing for your family. I had never heard this one before, and I thought it was great, and I thought it was a great segue to share about all the people that was the high people of just really the integrity and the people that we know and that all just out in the public. He and Oprah, they really just had a soul connection and just loved them. This is he and Louise Hay. This is Anita Morjani. Over here, Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra. And he did a lot of interviews. You can find these interviews online. Esther Hicks, Brian Weiss. He was the one that did Mastering was it Many Lives, Many Masters, all about reincarnation. And Wayne actually wrote a book and was collaborating with a lot of kids who remembered their past lives. And as you know, when they were little, so they were still very connected to what their past life was. So he was very fascinated in everything and anything. And then I love this picture. He officiated the ceremony for Ellen DeGeneres and Portia. And they were close friends, but they stayed extremely close. And they published this photo as for his memorial after he passed away. This came from Ellen's, I think it was her Twitter that she had posted this. I just thought it was such a sweet, it feels like it encompasses Wayne. You can see him, it feels like he's just there with them, supporting them and loving them. No judgments of anything. He was just open to everybody's lifestyle and everybody's, love is love. And towards the end, he would just wear shirts that said love, God, happiness. That was his message and one of the ways that he got it out there. So I'll share a little bit about his life on Maui, and then we'll take a break. And when we come back, I'll have something, because he was very much into taking stuff out of his books and putting it into our life. So I wanted to do that for us as well. But he lived on Maui for many years. He was definitely always out and about. He ran every day. He swam every day. I have countless stories of people who just see him out and about. And he was always willing to talk and gracious in that sense. Even though by this point he was probably multimillionaire, internationally known, traveled a lot, was on the road, traveling international almost constantly at some points, domestically as well, but definitely was internationally known. And he still, when he was not in his writing mode, was out and just open and available. Just open and available. And I shared about, and because with someone being that high profile, there's always some criticism. There's always some naysayers. So when that usually happens, it's because people aren't necessarily ready to hear what he had to say. And he understood that, and he absolutely actually accepted that that was part of the process. And what he knew, too, was that he was still planting a seed, even when there was rejection of it, even when there's resistance. He was still just the channel, just sending out that love and dropping those little seedlings wherever he went. But it did actually become, I don't know if scandalous is the right word, but perhaps he did get accused of plagiarism for his first book with Erroneous Zones, for not citing where he got a lot of his work from. And then he was able to actually show that he does in his book say where. So that just fizzled out. And that was in 1985. And then in 2010, he did a couple of books. He really delved into the Chinese philosophy of the Tao, and a lot just almost fell in love with Lao Tzu, and spent a year every day practicing the principles that he learned in that philosophy. And he wrote 2 books, Living the Wisdom of the Tao, and it was about his experience of living the wisdom of the Tao, and then Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. So that was going to go to court, and they did decide to settle out of court because it was just easier that way. But anyone that has that high profile, I love what Brene Brown says, if you're not in the ring, then you really shouldn't be throwing those stones or criticizing or judging. But I believe it's just, because I've been there too, where I wasn't ready to hear something, because in my unreadiness, I knew that something had to change. And I know the times I have the biggest reactions, it's usually exactly because what I'm hearing is accurate, and I don't like to hear it, and it doesn't feel good to hear it. So I know that there's definitely some of that, but also it's a new way of thinking. That's why we call it New Thought. We do live in this race consciousness that does not, for the most part, I believe it's shifting, I know it's shifted, but don't really follow these principles. Because in some ways, it's easier to blame, to doubt, to stay stuck, to not take responsibility. And that's what he was a real big advocate for, was self-actualizing and taking responsibility for our own lives. Not everybody's up to do that until they are. And he always said just to love people right where they are. So with that, I'd like to take a short break, maybe a 7-minute break. Grab a clipboard when you come back, and we'll see you in 7. Thank you.
See you in the gap.
Yeah, see you. Right on. So now what I'd like to do is shift gears a little bit. What I wanted to do comes from Wayne's book called Excuses Begone. Yeah. Yes. And this is a picture I just had up for another. Yeah, I know. He looks so young with his little baby, and then on Maui when Serena got married. So how I would like to do this is I actually like to just center us for a moment before we'll just take it step by step. So I'll just have you all just take a nice deep cleansing breath, letting everything go before this moment. And I invite you to just go with what first pops into your head when these questions come up. Don't judge it. Don't analyze it. Don't try to go around it. Just accept it for the timing, knowing that what's popping up is exactly what needs to pop up. And I start with, don't believe everything you think. And as you take that in, what I'll do is I'll have some questions for you. And I won't give much time in between purposefully, because it's not about thinking it through. It's about allowing it to pop in. So just think of an area in your life that you would like to be different. Doesn't matter what it is, literally what came in your mind right then. And just jot it down. So what we teach here at CSL, and one of the things that he talks about in his book, is that it's not here for a reason, whatever it is. And boiling it down to the simplest, it's because there's some belief below that. Sometimes we know right away what that belief is. Sometimes we don't, and it's unconscious and under the surface. But anything that's percolated as I've been talking, just write it down, including the belief. And if you're not sure, still put the first thoughts that came down. They tend to be little breadcrumbs to lead to what's really going on. As you're holding those thoughts, that belief, ask yourself, is it true? Wayne calls anything that we block from our experience, there's the excuses. Patrick called them the yeah buts. The yeah buts. So where did your yeah buts come from? Where are your excuses from? And a lot of times, there's usually more than one. So if there's a few coming, just let them flow. Uncensored, unhindered. What's the payoff of holding on to these excuses? Holding on to these yeah buts? Because there is a belief that we get something out of this. Otherwise, we simply wouldn't do it. And then when you go inside, ask yourself, what would my life look like if I couldn't use these excuses? If there is someone tapping the BS button every time that excuse came up, what would your life look like? Next, you can ask yourself, can I create a rational reason to change? Sometimes our mind needs something to hold on to. What is the rational reason to change? And then simply ask yourself, can I access universal cooperation in shedding old habits? This might be where more yeah buts come up. Do you believe that you can access universal cooperation in shedding old habits? And then the last, but not least, and probably the most important, how do I continuously reinforce this new way of being? Because it's new. It's different. We are rewiring and creating new beliefs. What can you do to support yourself and reinforce this new way of being? Let's take another deep breath. Just acknowledging and accepting and loving whatever came up, knowing that it's all good and it has served us. And if there's a release that's meant to happen, knowing that it's happened, and knowing that there is a safety and a love and an embracement here. And knowing that we can keep coming back to this time and time again. This feeling of release, this feeling of filling with new, and moving forward in the new. And this exercise can be used for any and all aspects, anything that comes up. Again, there is nothing that is big or small in the mind of God. And is anyone feeling like they want to share? We can take a few moments if anybody's wanting to.
We're discussing all these books he had written, and I have a lot of books in me that I haven't written. And so my biggest excuse is I don't have the time. That's right. So, but then when I thought about it in the past, like I used to write screenplays, and I did it when I had, and I probably put out about, I don't know, maybe 20, I don't know, more, maybe more, I don't know. But I did my screenwriting when I had 3 children and had a full-time job. So why would I think I don't have any time now? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good one. Anyone else want to share? Okay, great, Emma. Thank you.
For me, the old belief would be to stop being so hard on myself. I know that Doreen has heard me go through this. Oh my God, I can't believe you just did that. Oh God, really? You're just so stupid sometimes. She's heard me say that. So, and the new belief would be to just be kind and forgiving. We all make mistakes. I'm not stupid. And, go with the flow. Right? And I love myself. That's the payoff.
Beautiful. Thank you, Emma. Yes, sometimes it comes up right away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Nadara.
I had something came up in response to number 7, which had come out of meditation, which is that I don't have to work at steps 1 through 6. I can just notice something in the moment and give it to God's self, and what needs to dissolve dissolves, and then the feeling that I'm wanting to anchor comes in, and I'm finding that to be so mind-blowingly, amazingly simple, like letting go of my structures of having to work at stuff. Yeah. Letting God undo it.
Yeah, there you go. And it is a practice. Absolutely. Right. Could you repeat that? Because that's good, and I want everybody who's listening.
Some people live in consciousness. They've learned to get to that level of thinking. And so it comes, rather than 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, it's 1, 2, 7.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Patrick.
So something that actually surprised me, because I hadn't even gotten into that state yet, but what is the belief that is holding you back from this experience? And since I do a lot of inner child work, it did not surprise me, but I noticed I started wanting kind of almost to cry, and I wrote, it's not important what the actual thing I wanted to change is, because I don't feel like sharing that, but this was the answer to that, because my child will have to grow up. And that is so powerful, because not grow up like, not have fun anymore like everybody relates it to it. But once the child said, if I give this up now, then I don't get to have this anymore as my excuse. And so I'll have to grow up. And that's exactly what is necessary for me to do, for that child to do in this particular area, is to grow up and let it go. So it was very powerful, very powerful.
Do you think that if you feel that to grow up, that you would lose your sense of humor? I don't know.
Miss Emma? I'm enjoying the chess game that we're having right now, because I will have to say, since I am authentic about it, absolutely. That could be another part of of me that, and I'm not talking about whatever this particular thing is because it's personal, but I'll probably share it on Sunday. But anyway, but my point is that you're absolutely right. There is a part of me, I think, that thinks that if this were to occur, this area, that maybe I would be grown up or something. So maybe that's what the child's hanging on to as well. Thank you for that. Thank you. Oh, I'll never give that up. Trust me. No, I'm not going to be coming in. Trust me. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to CSL.
Well, thank you, everybody, for taking the time you're welcome, to delve in. And those online, we can certainly make this available, too. So, and it's actually right on the back cover. It was really great. I was going through the books in the office. I was like, oh, this is something we can do. Perfect. It just seemed so simple and so easy. And it was interesting because as I was typing it out, I was doing my own version. And what came up for me was actually about speaking tonight. And the who am I came up. Like, who am I to talk about Wayne Dyer? Who am I? And it was really interesting. So who am I to talk about Wayne Dyer? I'm someone who really loved him. And love him, and had my own personal experience. And what was the excuses were, I don't know, again, not anything necessarily revelation, but in a different venue. And what the payoff is to not shine and to stay small and to hide. And I've done that a lot. And really, I was going to say, and all of a sudden, again, I'm pretty sure it's something to do with letting go of that unforgiveness. And what my rational reason to change is because I know that this is my calling. Yeah, I just know it. And it's a way to be it now. So what would my life look like? It looks like me hanging out with you guys, sharing my experience about Wayne Dyer. That's how it looks. And I'm grateful that I saw that, because then now, like I shared earlier, now that we all, whatever it is that we acknowledged and came up, we can love it and use it to move us forward, as opposed to using it to keep us in what stuck or behind or bad or whatever it is. Because it's the, whatever comes up du jour, because it looks different sometimes. It shows up in different faces and in different expressions. But a lot of times it's the same belief. So thank you for just allowing me to grow in public with you. I'd like to continue on with his works. We've got a little bit more time, and then I'll open it up. He really loved kids. I mean, he had a ton. So that's a good thing. But he loved the idea of sharing his message and this philosophy with kids. And it made me really reflect, like, how different things would have been had I learned this as a little. And there was no judgment or regret. And I see the value of learning it now. Like, when I see the kids that come here on Sundays, and the kids that just come to the different events, or, just everything with the kids, it just is really wonderful to get this early. It's great to get it whenever we get it. However, oh, you have these. Oh, that's so great. That's so fun. You have which one? Unstoppable Me. Yeah, and Incredible You, and No Excuses. So, yeah, that's a good one right off the bat. So Wayne was diagnosed with leukemia in 2009, and he went on an extremely rigorous path of healing. He did both Western medicine, Eastern medicine, meditation, yoga. Really, he was open to whatever could possibly help him, heal him, and support him. And yet he was still quite sick for a couple of years. And a really good friend of his, Dr. Rita Piskova, she wanted him to have a session with John of God down in Brazil. So if you're not familiar with John of God, he lives in Brazil, and he does these spiritual surgeries, they call them. And he does not believe it's him that does it. He believes there's entities that come through and do the healing. He's just the channel for it. So Wayne actually had almost set plans to go down to Brazil to have this healing. And then just circumstances happened where he did not go. But his friend said, it doesn't have, you can do it remotely. You don't have to be there because of this one field. And again, the whole idea of remote healing is not new. They were practicing it. For school right now, we're reading Spirits in Rebellion, and they were doing remote healings in the 1800s, documenting them. They had been doing them for thousands of years prior to that, of course. So it wasn't a new idea, and he was game for it. So what was done was they set up a specific time in a specific place. All he had to do was lay there after taking some herbs and some blessed water that his friend Rita had sent to him from Brazil. John of God does his thing. It's somewhat of a mystery, but we know that it's done through spirit and as spirit. And Wayne says he had a great interview with Oprah, and Oprah's like, come on. Like, she's so great, because even though she's totally open and believes a lot and is open to a lot, she still almost plays that, like, come on, really? Like, for real? And Wayne really admitted it. He didn't feel anything. He didn't feel anything. It didn't seem like anything had happened until he got up to just kind of carry on with his day, and he felt exhausted. He went to go on his walk. He walks every day. And he pretty much had collapsed, and his friend reached out to him, and she's like, you need to sleep for 24 hours. It's as if you just had physical surgery. Like, you need to rest, you need to be there. And he really poo-pooed it in the beginning because he didn't feel anything until he pretty much collapsed, and his kids had to help him back to bed, and he slept for exactly 24 hours. And he got up, and he just felt different. That's all he could really describe it. And then there was another appointment set up for a week later where they were going to take out the sutures. And he was like, sutures? What do you, like, there was no surgery. Like, and saying that, like, it's like my leukemia, it's a blood thing. Like, you wouldn't even, but because, like what Dyer just said, it's a psychic surgery. And he had his publisher, Reed Tracy, who was very much active and pretty much ran Hay House, came and saw that he had a scar along the back of his neck, and then a few weeks later that scar was gone. And it was just a week, so the second psychic session with John of God, it was his birthday, it was his 70th birthday, and he said he just was overcame with this feeling and this outpouring of this divine universal love. And he said that that's when he really found his purpose, was to be that vessel of love and that unconditional love. And so what he did for his birthday is he got a stack of $50 bills and went around and just gave them to people he would meet, and just would talk to people, connect with them, and then shared the money. And he just said he knew, and he just followed in his intuition on who it was meant to be. And that's when things dramatically shifted for him. And health-wise, about 5 months later, he went to an event in New York at the Omega Institute where he actually got to meet John of God in person. And he said, just like everybody else at the event, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people, he lined up and was there in line. And when he got to John of God, he said in Portuguese that you are well. And sure enough, when he passed away and they did an autopsy, they could not find a trace of leukemia in his body. And he had died of a heart attack, which they were pretty certain that's what it was. But it was not related at whatsoever with his leukemia. And the healing had happened in 2011, but he became more open about sharing it a little bit later on. Like, it took him a little bit, I think, to really probably grasp and process what happened, and that shift of just that wanting to be that outpouring of love throughout his life. And that's really what he embodied and just lived from and lived as, was that love. I've shared this as we've been going along, but I did want to just get more into how it ties into New Thought, which is the umbrella that Science of Mind and Spirit is under, along with many other philosophies. But really, Wayne was a metaphysician, simply because he worked in the world of the unseen. He changed and taught how to change the outside by changing our insides, by doing it with our thoughts and our beliefs. He really just, I shared it earlier, that whole idea of taking responsibility and that we're always at choice, always. He also believed that everything is perfect exactly as it is. Even though we may be wanting to experience something different, where we are is perfect. How we are right now is perfect. And when we come from that place of believing that everything is perfect, there's an allowance, there's a receiving, there's an acceptance that can happen in our life. He also took his inspiration from all sorts of philosophies, just like Ernest Holmes did. He didn't create anything. He just assimilated everything and brought it into, again, same, just a different version, his personal version. And he even took inspiration from Wayne Dyer. Of course he did. But Wayne Dyer took inspiration from Ernest Holmes, is what I meant to say. And this is his book, Being in Balance, which is feels like little vignettes, but super colorful, and it's filled with just simple ideas to bring into our days, but also lots of different quotes from all sorts of philosophies. So right on page 1, he quotes Ernest Holmes. True imagination is not fanciful daydreaming. It is fire from heaven. Pretty rad, huh? I could feel that. And he really wasn't part of any particular church organization, at least none that I ever saw him associate himself with. Seemed like he was a free thinker in that way, where he was just really open to anything and everything. So this was really thought-provoking. Be miserable or motivate yourself. Whatever has to be done, it's always your choice. Also, I've been mentioning this as we've been going along, but I wanted to have it all compiled. If anything got stirred or you want to learn more, read more, hear more, it's abundant out there. And doing this has really been great as well, because it really just brought up a lot of the books that I had read years ago, different books. I had found all these books in the bookcases here at the office, so it was fun to just go through them and just remind myself. It's just another way to bring this philosophy into our lives. And so he's written over 40 books. A lot of them are available as audiobooks. What I love about our library is that they are tied with an app called Overdrive, where you can get ebooks and audiobooks for free. And you can search, and it has a whole listing of anything you want. A lot of the videos, interviews, his PBS specials are on YouTube. He actually has his own YouTube channel. He has the different interviews, a lot of the people that we saw in the pictures earlier. His website and his official Facebook page, podcast, are all as if he's still alive. And it's because his legacy is, he is still here. He is still moving through everything that he does. And then there's a lot of the video programs and the lectures that he did, especially the last few years prior to him passing, with Hay House. A lot of those are recorded. And he was amazing, where he actually, after a turning point in his life, where he was getting ready for an event, he was about to go on stage. He said he always prayed and meditated before he did any of his talks. And during that meditation, this was years ago, he realized that he didn't have his notes, and all his notes were at the hotel. And he had that moment of like, crap, maybe not verbatim. But what he realized is that everything is already in him. He already knew all that he wanted to share. And he said from that day forward, he never used notes. So everything was all spirit guided, all from his heart. And the event I saw him at, he was pretty much just sitting down as if he was, talking with us on the couch. Except there was, 2,000 of us talking on the couch. But he just always shared from that space and that place. And I think that is one of the reasons why he reached out to so many. It was not rehearsed. It was not scripted. And he just shared whatever came through. And that's why all his talks are all different. Although he may share some of the same stories, everything always almost got personalized for whatever event that he was having or that he was at. And that really made it pretty special. And then, of course, he had his movies, such as The Shift. These are some of the covers of the books that he has. I Can See Clearly Now, The Power of Intention, Wishes Fulfilled, Everyday Wisdom, Excuses Be Gone. And then there's the Essential Wayne Dyer collection. And I just thought some of them are really colorful and pretty, like that 10 Secrets. But it just has even a feel to it. I'll pass around. It's spongy and it feels very inviting. There was like a whole shift where he also got just very colorful and there's a more playful side. And Hay House is very good at bringing that sort of book feel. Like it's literally a book feel. Whoops. What'd I do? No notes. Yeah, no. And this is my favorite quote. I am realistic. I expect miracles. And it came with so many different backgrounds, but it reminded me about all the rainbows that we have here on Kauai and that we see on such a regular basis. It is. You can see the light one. Yay. At the life and times of Wayne Dyer. Beautiful. My pleasure. This was really beautiful. And so I'll just close out the night with a treatment, just bringing everything that's been shared, perhaps anything that's been stirred, knowing that it's all been perfect. And that in this moment, God is right here. Spirit, this universal energy that is ever creative, ever inspiring, ever motivating, and always expressing divinely through each and every one of us in this room, online, and where this goes out and the ripple effect, just knowing that it's perfect. And I just know and acknowledge that everything that's unfolded here was divine. It was perfect. Everything that needed to be heard was heard. Anything that needed to be healed was healed. Anything that needed to be revealed was revealed, and done with such ease and love and grace. And knowing that the life and the works and the being called Wayne Dyer, that the legacy goes on and on and on and on. Knowing that it just perpetuates. It just ripples out into our lives. As we leave here tonight, knowing that this has been a divine gathering, a consciousness raising time together. And I am knowing this and I am claiming this with so much gratitude for the time, for the works, for the love of Wayne Dyer, for the spirit that shows up as each and every one of us, knowing that our song is being sung. Our books are being written, our dance is being danced, whatever it is. I know and acknowledge that there is a receptivity in each one of us to move forth and grow in our lives. And I'm grateful for this. And I send this out as law into law, knowing it's already been done, already in this moment achieved. And I release it and get out of the way, and together we affirm it. And so it is.